זכי בחלקכם בחלקכי מנחוין פתיכת כדי שלחבנג לך בחלי בחמך כהי דותן נרופות לרוזודוינג דלת היכלי דלבקוינג. Today's video is brought to you by procrastination. Procrastination, it's, well, I'll tell you later. The point of this language was to push myself in a few ways, mainly with pronouncing sounds that aren't in my native language. To pursue this goal, I chose to feature retroflex consonants, a couple of velar plosives, more n's than I knew existed, and this thing. I also wanted to try consonant clusters that I'm not confident with, but that ended up being null. It ended up being very English in the long run, just with weird flips of the tongue. You've already heard how well that turned out, but for my sake, it gets so much worse. Grammatically, it's a subject-object-verb sentence structure, with the nominative, dative, and accusative cases, with pronouns reflecting the first, second, and third persons, both singular and plural, with further inclusivities on the plurals, and verbal inflections that reflect the person and plurality of the associated noun, and preceded by an auxiliary verb denoting both tense and aspect. I bit off entirely too much. But I hit a snag halfway in. The language had no direction because I couldn't stop thinking about who would even use it. So I started back in on the language, intending it to be used by poets and wordsmiths who had an emphasis on truth. From there, I devised branches in the language, making this proto-lang that would become two separate languages based upon interpretation of individual sounds, until one day, a pidgin is created of the branches, resulting in a third language that was a mashup of the two. From there, plans arose for an orthography that would shift with each branch, resulting in some fabulous constructions of words. And then I began to hate the language. Let's look at the grammar again. Nouns are split into one of four genders based on animacy and animacy, and whether it is smaller than a human or at least as large as a human. All nouns receive one of each, so the genders for each noun are animate greater, animate lesser, inanimate greater, and inanimate lesser. Each of these had conjugations for the nominative, dative, and accusative cases that ended up just being tacked on to the end of the noun. Adjectives preceded the nouns they modified, and the first adjective in the series took the same conjugation as the modified noun, but since they tended to be derived from verbs, this ended up being verbs conjugated as nouns. Adverbs functioned the same, except they were derived from nouns, so they ended up being inflected the same as the modified verb. This resulted in sentences that saw nouns with verb inflections sitting immediately next to conjugated nouns, and the entire structure was, unsurprisingly, more convoluted than it was interesting. And then I had my grand idea. It started with a couple of sample translations just to test the system and make sure I had a good grasp on what I was doing. Seeing as how these translations went well, I decided to up my game. I decided to translate Macbeth's to be or not to be speech. It sounded perfect. The language was eventually to be used by poets and orators who nearly revere spoken word performance, so why not try one of the most popular quotes known to English Lit students? What I forgot is that Shakespeare doesn't write prose in modern English with modern English conventions, and that's if we ignore the fact that he made up words for his prose. But I attempted to do it, and I quit very quickly. Thinking about the lines in terms of modern English wasn't a big help, so I plowed on as best as I could, but the further I got into the speech, the more I realized something extremely crucial to this project. So I made it but a few lines in, and I have to put it down. If I don't, I cannot get to projects I'm ready to begin with, nor can I proceed to my next conlang. It is at this point in my personal journey as a conlanger that I realize something. If you don't like the language you're constructing, drop it. That being said, I do want to share what I managed to eke out. So if you'll be kind enough to indulge me butchering these sounds, here we go. legog ngoe, lu legog, kush lumur, legoing, kushihilchachoing, mu gehem nachlip, schloch runglig, schlachmu shizurchep, krelchep, de lingoing, gor chudde shochem mu zofish, de nehuding ne hol, de krungutoing, de kuting, gededid thukud zoch, juredid yemr, begleschjechep, nu deschep, mudluth, zezudedgep. Told you that was awful. Susan, I am so sorry. Thank you for joining me. If you don't completely dislike what I'm doing, please feel free to leave a comment, like, subscribe, or just finish the video out. If you're so inclined, I have a Discord server that's in desperate need of members. The link is in the description. Also, keep an eye out for updates. I'm working on something that might interest you if you've ever played a tabletop role-playing game. Until next time.